day, Nehemiah comes to Jerusalem and he begins to observe the ruins. He begins to observe the wall in particular and how it's been broken down and destroyed from all of the battle and the war as a result of the Babylonian captivity. And after doing all of that, he comes to the men of Jerusalem and he says, "Come, let's rebuild the wall of Jerusalem. Let's restore Jerusalem to its former glory." And so they pick up their tools and they begin the good work. They have their work clothes on, they have their gloves on, they have all of their hammers, and they're hammering and they're measuring and they're leveling things out, making sure everything is straight and everything is in order and the work is progressing as it looks like it should be going. And then out of the blue, it would seem, comes a problem, an issue, a situation that is antagonistic to their progress. These men show up by the name of Sanballat, Tobiah, and Geshem, and they come asking, "What do you think you're doing with this work? What gives you the right to progress in this manner? Who gave you a permit? Who gave you the permission to do this thing? Are you going to overrule and defy the king?" You see, in the construction industry, you have to have a permit to build something or to rebuild it. And so that's what's being challenged. Their right, their permit to progress. The men, Sanballat, Tobiah, and Geshem, are saying, "Where is your permit?" And I know what it's like to be in a similar situation as Nehemiah. And I bet you do too. I bet there's some of you in the room that know what it's like to begin a situation, to begin a progress in a circumstance, and then you have something out of nowhere that comes accusing you and saying that you have no right to progress in this area of your life. Let's think for a moment. For some of you, it might be starting a family. And then you set out to start a family, and then you have the room painted, you have everything, you're planning the shower, and all of those things are occurring. And then a miscarriage taps you on the shoulder and it says, "Excuse me, what made you think that you could start a family? What made you think that you could forward the next generation? What made you think that you could have a baby?" Or maybe for someone else in the room, it's your financial security. And you said this year, this was going to be the year that you got your finances in order. And you've had some unexpected expenses to come out of the blue. Maybe it's a pipe bursting, or you had to put the car in the shop for some reason. Or you look at your credit score and your credit score is laughing back at you and saying, "Ha ha ha, you thought that you were going to get your finances in order this year? Think again." Or maybe you decide to step out in faith and try something new. And you said that I'm going to pursue this idea. I'm going to present this to my boss that I've been thinking about, that I think will work better on our job. Or I'm going to do this in my family, or I'm going to do this in the community. And then you have insecurities and past failures that sneak up on you. And they say, "Excuse me, what right do you have to think that you can be bold enough, that you can have the courage enough to do this thing, that you are even competent enough to attempt such a feat?" Or for others, maybe it's going back to school. And then you start to think, well, I have a family, I have my church duties, I have my job that consumes a great deal of my week. But you know in your heart that you feel you're supposed to go to school. But all of those competing priorities come to you and they say, "How could you possibly think that this is going to work?" I mean, what happens? What do you do when your situation says that you can't do what you feel God has permitted you to do? What do you do when you believe God said something, but you don't see what he said in your life? What you see is completely opposite of the positive thing that God said. The first thing that you do is you speak back. Nehemiah stood flat-footed and he said, "The God of heaven will prosper us, and we will arise and we will build." You have to say to yourself, "I am more than a conqueror. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. I'm the head, I'm not the tail. I'm above, I'm not beneath. I can do whatever God has designed for me to do. If God said it, then it is so, and that settles it." You have to speak back to your situation and say, "I will finish this. I will arise. I will build." And that is what Nehemiah said. And that's what we have to say in our lives today. We have to speak back to our situation. Because you have to remember that death and life is in the power of your tongue, and you have the power to speak to your situation. The voices are going to be speaking to you. All kinds of negative forces are going to be speaking to you, but you have to speak back and speak positive things and speak life into your situation. The second thing that you have to do is you have to do the work anyway. None of the accusing, none of the laughing, none of the scoffing stopped Nehemiah and his men from rebuilding that wall. They did it anyway because they had a permit from God. They had a permit from the King of Kings. And by the way, they also had permission from King Artaxerxes, because that's how Nehemiah got there in the first place. You have to have the perseverance to push past your problems. If God affirmed it in heaven, he will confirm it in your life here on the earth. So I challenge you today. Whatever the King of Kings has permitted you to do, or whatever he's permitted you to build, whatever he's permitted you to rebuild, you do that work, you do that thing. If God has inspired you to start a business, you start that business. Maybe it's a family, starting a family, and you don't know how everything is going to work out because you've seen all of the things that other parents go through, and you've seen all the setbacks, and you've seen all the adversities, and maybe you have actually suffered a miscarriage. But if God has put something in you that says, I want to start a family, you start that family. Maybe it's a career change or a career move, and you need to move up in the company that you're in, or you need to move to another company and get a different job. You make that career change and that career move. Maybe it's being more involved in the community, more involved in your church, more involved in whatever it may be. You build that thing. You build those relationships. Maybe it's rebuilding relationships with your family, with your children, with your spouse. You rebuild that if that is what you feel God has told you to do. For some of you, you're like Nehemiah. You've done all the surveying, you've done all the prep work you can, and now it's time to actually do some work. There comes a point when you can do no more preparation and you just have to step out and do what it is that God has called you to do. So I challenge you today to rebuild, to build, to understand and realize that you have a permit to progress. And take advantage of, utilize what God has inspired you to do. And do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. Step out in faith and do what God has called you to do. Amen. And may you be blessed.